There's something almost funny about this. Not funny in a dismissive way, funny in the specific, slightly painful way of two people who have been navigating around each other with enormous care and precision, each trying not to want too visibly, each trying not to need too obviously, each constructing elaborate interior architecture around something they're pretending is less significant than it is, and then discovering that the whole careful construction was unnecessary. That the thing they were protecting themselves from wanting, the other person also wants, has been wanting possibly for longer. And the discovery of that when it arrives has a quality of both relief and absurdity. The specific feeling of having spent significant energy solving a problem that didn't exist in the form you thought it existed. You were both working so hard in the same direction. Without knowing, let me describe what this looks like from the inside of your experience, because I think you've been operating with a particular assumption, not one you necessarily chose consciously, one that formed gradually through the accumulation of ambiguous interactions and unclear signals and the specific kind of evidence that your perception collected and filed under uncertain rather than confirmed. The assumption that you want this more than they do, that your investment, whatever form it takes, however specific it is to the particular texture of your feelings about this person, exceeds theirs. That the balance of wanting is unequal in a direction that puts you at a disadvantage. That if the interior states of both people were somehow visible simultaneously, yours would be larger, more specific, more committed. That assumption has been doing something to how you move through this, has been producing a particular quality of restraint, of careful management, of making sure you never quite arrive at the full expression of what you feel, because arriving there, being fully present in your own wanting, feels like exposure without the protection of knowing. The wanting goes both ways, and that restraint, that careful, exhausting, completely understandable restraint is based on something that isn't true. Hold on, because I want to try to describe what's actually happening on their side, what they've been carrying, what the interior of this looks like from where they're standing, because they have an assumption too. Their assumption is the mirror image of yours. They've been operating under the belief that the balance of wanting tilts in your direction, in your favor, leaving them in the exposed position, that you are less invested, more certain, more self-possessed in relation to this particular thing, that whatever they feel when they're in your orbit, whatever happens in them when you're present, you experience some calmer, less disrupted version of they think you have the advantage. You think they have the advantage. Both of you are wrong. Both of you are sitting with the same sized feeling, the same quality of investment, the same private hope. And each of you has constructed, from the available evidence, a reading of the situation that puts you in the more vulnerable position, which means both of you have been protecting yourselves from something that doesn't require protection. There's an image, two people standing on opposite sides of a room, each facing slightly away, not dramatically, not with their backs fully turned, just angled. The specific posture of someone who is aware of what's across the room from them and is managing that awareness by not fully facing it. And each of them, in the private interior of their own experience, is oriented completely toward the center of the room, toward where the other person is. But the angle of their body communicates something different. Communicates, I'm not particularly focused on that direction. And both of them are reading each other's body language, and both of them are concluding the same thing, that the other person is less focused, less oriented, less in it, and both of them are wrong. And neither of them knows the other is wrong because they're both performing the same protective indirection. The more I sit with this, the more I keep finding something specific about why this particular misreading has lasted as long as it has. You're both precise. That's the thing. That's the specific quality that makes this particular miscommunication so durable. If either of you were less careful, less attentive, less attuned to how you're presenting, the leakage would be more obvious. The feeling would show in ways that couldn't be misread. But you're both good at managing presentation, both sophisticated in how much of your interior you allow to be visible, both practiced at the specific art of carrying something significant without it showing in obvious ways. And two people who are both skilled at not showing are going to misread each other. Because the absence of obvious signal gets interpreted as absence of feeling, when actually it's just skillful concealment of feeling by both parties simultaneously, creating a situation where two people with equivalent investments in something are each convinced they're more invested than the other. Wait. There's something I want to go deeper on here because it keeps surfacing and I don't want to move past it. The thing you both want, I've been describing it in terms of the dynamic between you, the mutual wanting, the mutual concealment, the mutual misreading, but I want to try to describe what the actual want is, not abstractly, specifically, because what I keep finding when I sit with both energies simultaneously is that it's not just each other in the simple sense. It's a particular quality of connection. The specific, rare, almost impossible to find quality of being with someone where you don't have to manage yourself, where the interior version and the exterior version don't have to be maintained as separate things, where the energy that usually goes into presentation can go somewhere else, into genuine exchange, into actual presence, into the specific richness of two people who are each complex, encountering each other without the usual filters. That's what you both want. Not just a relationship in the general sense. That specific thing, that particular quality of ease within depth that neither of you has found easily or often. And here's the thing that keeps landing when I sit with this. You recognized it in each other, both of you, independently, without the other knowing. You each saw something in the other that you'd been looking for without having adequate language for, and the recognition produced a feeling significant enough to require concealment, which is why the concealment is so elaborate, which is why the misreading has been so persistent. You're both protecting something real. I want to talk about the specific fear driving each of you, because they're not identical fears. The wanting is the same, the fear is different. Yours is the fear of being more seen than they want to be seen by you, of arriving fully in something and discovering that your full arrival is more than the situation can hold, of being in the specific way that you are capable of being with all the depth and attention and care that you bring too much for what this turns out to actually be. You've been too much before, not objectively, in this specific experience of bringing your full self to something and watching that something contract in response. And that experience, wherever it happened, however long ago, installed something, a governing instinct that says, don't arrive fully until arrival is safe, until you know the container can hold you, Their fear is different in quality. What I keep getting from them is the fear of wanting something and being responsible for wanting it, of reaching, and the reaching being the thing that changes the dynamic in a way that can't be reversed, of saying something true and the truth being more than the situation can absorb. They've been the one who wanted too much before, not objectively, in their own experience, in the specific way of someone whose feeling has, in previous situations, arrived before the other person's capacity to receive it, who has found themselves in the exposed position of having said something real before the ground was ready for it. And that experience installed something too, a governing instinct that says, wait, make sure, don't be the one who arrives first. So here's what's been happening. You're waiting for safety before arriving. They're waiting to not be first. Both waiting conditions require the other person to move first. Neither person is moving first because both people think the other person's first move is less likely. And the whole thing has been sitting in this suspended state of mutual waiting that feels, from the inside of each person's experience, like evidence that the other person doesn't feel the same way, when actually it's evidence that both people feel exactly the same way. There's something coming that I want to describe, a crack in the symmetry, because symmetrical standoffs don't last forever. Something always shifts. Some piece of information arrives, or some situation creates a context, or some accumulation of time finally tips the balance of one person's caution and the careful equilibrium breaks. What I keep getting is that the crack is coming from their side. Not because they're braver, because something in their specific situation has changed in a way that makes continued waiting feel more costly than reaching. Something made the risk of staying silent larger than the risk of speaking. I keep getting a sense of something they saw or heard or understood about your life, about where you are, about what's developing for you, about the specific possibility that time might be creating a situation where what was available is no longer available in the same form. And that sense of possible closing window is going to break the symmetry. I want to describe what happens when the symmetry breaks, because it's not a flood. It's not this person suddenly becoming fully open and declarative and saying everything they've been holding with complete clarity and zero hesitation. It's more like a door opening slightly, a remark that has slightly more weight than its surface carries, a moment of eye contact held slightly longer than usual, a question that seems ordinary but is actually reaching for something specific. A small, almost deniable communication that is, if you're paying the right kind of attention, clearly an invitation to close some of the distance, to angle your body slightly toward the center of the room, to let some of what you've been concealing become less concealed. And here's what's going to be required of you in that moment. Courage of a particular kind. Not the dramatic, grand gesture kind. The specific, small, costs something real kind of courage that arrives in ordinary moments. The courage to receive the small opening as the significant thing it actually is, rather than the manageable, deniable, could-be-nothing thing it appears to be. The courage to be the second person to move. To let them see that their opening was received, that the door they cracked, you were standing right on the other side of, I want to say something about what this revelation, the discovery that you both want the same thing is going to do to the dynamic, because it changes something fundamental. Right now, both of you are navigating from incomplete information. Both of you are making decisions based on a reading of the situation that is significantly inaccurate. Both of you are spending energy on protection from a threat that doesn't exist in the form you think it exists. When the information corrects, when both of you arrive, however gradually, at the understanding that the wanting is mutual, that energy becomes available for something else, for actual presence with each other, for the specific richness of two people who are both in something, both aware they're both in it, both no longer required to manage the concealment. And what presence looks like between two people who have been this careful, this attentive, this genuinely oriented toward each other while pretending not to be, is extraordinary. Because all that capacity for depth and attention and care that has been going into concealment gets redirected into each other. And that redirection is what both of you have actually been wanting all along. The last thing, there's something quietly profound about two people who have been unknowingly protecting each other's feelings by concealing their own, who have each absorbed the cost of their own wanting to spare the other person the discomfort of an unwanted intensity, who have each, in their own private way, been considerate of the other person, even in the process of miscommunicating with them. That's not dysfunction dressed as care. That's two people with enough genuine regard for each other that even their self-protection was oriented around the other person's experience. And when that level of mutual consideration meets the discovery of mutual wanting, when two people who have each been privately careful about the other's feelings discover that the other person has been doing exactly the same thing, something happens, something that doesn't have an easy name, a specific, quiet, slightly disbelieving recognition of being met, not just wanted, met in exactly the specific, careful, depth-honoring way that you've each been hoping for without fully letting yourselves hope. That's coming, not as a grand arrival, as a gradual, slightly surprised, deeply relieving discovery that you've been on the same side of this the whole time. Both of you, waiting for the other to know it,